topic of this series is this particular webinar is driving leadership lessons via a virtual Everest climb simulation, the game design elements to make it happen by Ms. Himani Chandorkar, co-founder Acumen 360 and Attitude 360 India. Welcome you for this particular seminar. And before starting the session, I would like to invite Dr. K.N. Guru Prasad, Director of Sri Vaishnav School of Science, for the welcome address.
Thank you, Madam Rupali. So, on behalf of Sri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, I welcome Ms. Himani Chandorkar, co-founder of Acumen 360 and Attitude 360, and our distinguished speaker today in this program. She's going to speak on an interesting topic, Virtual Everest Climb Simulation. This as a leadership lessons via this simulation. That's what I understand from the topic she has chosen. I like the topic very much because many of us climb Everest only virtually. I think there are plenty of people who would like to climb it virtually, since we can't think of climbing it really. So in reality, so I'm quite curious to know that what Madam Himani is going to speak about, and how does she use this simulation for the purpose of learning and for the purpose of leadership. So I welcome you once again, and all the other guests, including Madam Elizabeth, always in many seminars here on this line. So over to you, Madam Rupali.
Thank you, sir. Before inviting our expert for the session, I would like to introduce her, Ms. Himani Chandorkar, a seasoned L&D professional with 19 years of experience. She is the co-founder Acumen 360, which has positively impacted hundreds of companies and 50,000 plus individuals across industries and countries through its learning and development solutions. She is also co-founder of Attitude 360, rated in the top 20 ventures incubated with IIM Bangalore and NSR CEL 2021 for innovative and impactful experimental learning simulations, certified in NLP, as well as certified in TA from ITAA, that is International Transactional Analysis Association. Her passion to make learning interventions deliver on outcomes has earned her and her company award and accolades. She has also been invited multiple times to present at international learning and gamification conferences. And a bit adventure and blogger, she is also co-authoring a book on small business management. I welcome her for the session and request her to please start.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thank you, Guru Prasad sir, for your invite as well. Yes, before we start now, I would just like to check. I have the sharing rights, right? Can I share my screen? Yes, great. No, I think so. I'll need sharing rights. It says disabled.
Okay.
Yes, now I'm able to do that. Thank you. Am I audible? Am I clearly audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. And can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. So as Dr. Guru Prasad said that a lot of us may want to climb the Everest virtually, because climbing those 29,000 deadly feet is something which may not be very palatable for a lot of us. But yes, this virtual expedition takes you to the top of summit without risking your lives, but at the same time teaching you lessons that you can learn from mountains. So before I begin, I would like to ask a question to the audience, because yes, when it comes to mountains and leadership, I myself am an adventurer. I have done a lot of treks in the Himalayas. We lead treks in the Himalayas. So mountains have a connection with leadership. You learn a lot of leadership and team lessons when you are climbing mountains. And what I would want to ask all of you who are present in the audience right now, I would like to keep it a little interactive when we are talking about simulations and gamification. I would not want it to be one way. So if you have your mobile phones with you, go to menti.com. The code is there on the screen, 89299809. And I would like to know from you, what do you feel? There must be people in this audience who have climbed mountains, hills, and I'm sure whenever you must have experienced the nature or mountains, you must have learned some lessons. So what do you feel are the lessons that can be learned from mountains? You can go to this link and you can start entering your responses. I'll just show what responses are coming in. Yes, I can see the responses coming in now. Allows to go beyond one's physical and mental capacities. Okay. Fear of heights is both very real and limiting, and good leaders accept this as a factor in their responses to staff. Okay, great. Top of the mind thoughts. It could be a single word that comes to your mind when you think of lessons from the mountains. Discipline and courage. Wonderful. I'm going to wait for another minute.
I don't know that.
Persistence, resilience, humility, teamwork, mindfulness. This seems from a person who has climbed mountains. Because the third one that you've put up is very true. Humility is a big learning, and as leaders, that is a learning which is extremely essential. As you go higher, are you still humble? Teaches us coexistence relationship between the nature and human, persistence, consistency. Absolutely. 30 more seconds. I see 46 people in this room. I see 6 responses. I need a few more here. Okay, so we are done with the 30 seconds, and I have received some responses here which are very much in line with what leadership lessons or what team lessons can you learn when you actually climb mountains. And when you talk about learning lessons from the mountains in real, yes. When it comes to a virtual session, how do we replicate that? That is something that I'm going to talk to you about. So let's go ahead with the presentation again. So these are certain glimpses of when we actually do leadership lessons in the mountains. But now, how do we do it virtually? So simulation is a way to actually simulate an environment where you are able to actually experience what happens in the mountains, but not by being in the mountains. But first of all, I'm going to run one more Mentimeter. I need a few more responses. So before I start off, I want you guys to speak more. There is one more Mentimeter exercise I want you to do. Why simulations? We are in a conference, we are in a webinar today, which talks about use of simulations for learning or driving leadership lessons. But why simulations? Why do we need to use simulations? So you can enter this and go to Mentimeter again. And I want to know from you, why do you feel simulations work better than a normal training session? I'm going back to the screen.
7473. Oh no.
Can you see the key over there at the top?
5790.
7473-5790. Why simulations? Okay, so I can see over here a reality check, engagement, challenge. What else? Immersion, absolutely, immersion. Wow, now you guys are getting acclimatized. So I can see more responses coming in. Predicting outcomes, exploration, training and testing, absolutely. I'm going to hold on for another 30 seconds. Perseverance, putting yourself in other shoes, experiment. Beyond passive reception, the what if questions. Excitement. Last 10 seconds. Yes. So experience, active, optimization. Wonderful. So I can see a lot of you in connect with why do we use simulations. And now looking at, yes, why they work. I'll go back to my slideshow. So why simulations? I'll just run a quick video and I'll talk a bit about it. If you look at this, simulations are something which have been always used in various professions, in various trainings, whether it is a pilot or an engineer, whether it's an astronaut. And in a way, simulations give a safe space to make mistakes. So you get a safe space to make mistakes without actually paying the cost of loss of relationships, results, or resources. And we use a lot of simulations for technical understanding, But when it comes to behaviors, when it comes to leadership behaviors, yes, there are certain things, how you lead as a leader, that's going to impact the resources that you use, that's going to impact the relationships that you have at work, that's going to impact eventually the results. And that's why simulations work well even when we look at managerial behaviors. So today we'll look at how the Everest simulation works and how we are going to use it for managerial learning. First of all, why Everest? So when you talk about Everest, Everest is a universal metaphor for aspirations, challenging your limits, and thinking beyond the normal. And so when it comes to any aspirational goals, in the beginning, when we looked at leadership lessons, there were people who talked about when you, on mentee.com, people shared that, okay, when you're at a height, how do you handle that fear? How do you handle your people over there? So yes, there are a lot of challenging goals that you have to pursue as a leader, and you have to take your team along with you. And Everest is a good metaphor, or I would say a universal metaphor when it comes to aspirations, challenging your limits, and thinking beyond the regular. Plus, Everest is exciting. As Dr. Guru Prasad said in the beginning, not all of us will climb Everest, but everybody gets excited by the name of Everest. And that is what makes the simulation all the more engaging. So when we looked at why simulations and why Everest mountains can be used in simulations, yes, it's exciting, it's engaging, and if we can make it immersive, then all the more better. When you look at creating a simulation like this, how do the game mechanics work? So it's first thing is about how do you translate the real life situations into gaming elements. So this simulation that we have designed, it's based on real life scenarios. There were interactions with mountaineers, with people who have actually climbed Everest. The real life scenarios were taken from them. Real life video and photo footage was taken from them. The challenges in the simulation were designed around those real life scenarios. And by doing this, the real life situations were transferred into the reality of the game, creating those complex situations wherein people experience what happens in the real scenarios. But the heart of a simulation is in what happens after that, and that is debriefing. And that is about how in the game you experience certain elements which actually can be taken back into your real life. And yes, those lessons from Everest thus get transferred into our real lives. Now, how does this simulation work? So what is the process which can make this, although you're not climbing the Everest for real, how do you make it immersive enough, engaging enough that people do feel that, yes, we are climbing Everest and we are learning the lessons which can be learned from the mountains. So a simulation, if you want to make it immersive, you need to have certain elements of it which create a build-up. So when we designed the simulation, we had a preparatory part. If anybody in this room has climbed a mountain, you would know that mountain climbing requires preparation. When you're doing high altitude treks, you go through a process called acclimatization. And something like Everest, it has an acclimatization period of almost a month or even more than that, where people reach the Everest base camp, and what they call it, they are called rotations. They go to camp 1, come back to Everest base camp, go to camp 2, come back to EBC again. This is because they are getting used to the lower oxygen levels. And this is exactly what we do when we have people participating in a virtual Everest climb simulation. They have a preparatory period. What happens in this preparatory period? We have a preparatory meet wherein people come together in a virtual meeting. It's a 1-hour session. The purpose being introduction, the teams are set up. So this is a multiple team game. So multiple teams are set up. The goal setting happens over here. The team norms are created over here. And the subject matter experts. So each person in the simulation plays the role of a subject matter expert. The briefing is done over here. So this is done well in advance. They get their material, they get their roles, and now they have some time to go through it, go through certain videos. and get into the role. So immerse themselves into the role before they actually come into the simulation. Once this preparatory period is done, then they actually come for the simulation. So this particular simulation was designed during the pandemic when all the training moved to virtual. And that's the time we thought that, yes, it's important to make virtual experiential. And that's when this simulation was designed in a virtual format. Today, we do it in a virtual as well as a physical format. But when we did it in a virtual format, yes, we earlier started with 4 teams of 6 members each, climbing the Everest synchronously in a Zoom session, in breakout rooms, each team member having a specific expert role to play. Of course, now we have moved from 4 teams of 6 members each. We have gone right up to 20 teams of 10 members each, happening in a virtual format as well as a physical format. But this is how it started. Now, when they're going through the virtual simulation, there are facilitators who are observing the behaviors of each of the participants in the simulation and how they are taking decisions, how they are reacting to other team members. And these are certain things which are noted down by the facilitators, as well as this becomes good food for thought for the team members who are participating in this fast-paced simulation to reflect upon when we come to the third part of the simulation. That is team reflections. Now, when team reflections happen, it's about how did we do in the simulation? What could we do differently? What did we learn? And then connecting it with the real Everest of life. So what are the real work Everest goals? How do we plan the tentative way forward? How do I want to develop certain skills as a leader, as a team member to perform better in my real Everest as compared to what I did in the simulation? So this is how this particular simulation spans out. But then what are the things that can be learned when we climb an Everest virtually? So when you look at that, as I said, this is a simulation developed in consultation with a real Everester. He climbed Everest in 2019, is a TEDx speaker, and he runs his own business as well. Wrote a book called 7 Lessons from Everest, which he learned while he was climbing to the summit of Everest. And these are the 7 leadership lessons which are integrated in the simulation. So if you look at them, these are the lessons which are learned when you really climb Everest, but these are the ones which are also learned when you climb a virtual Everest. And how do we do that? Preparation plus passion is performance. So yes, we have a preparatory meet before the virtual simulation. So when a simulation is preceded by preparation, this particular point very clearly gets debriefed when we have a debriefing session, because those members who come in prepared into the simulation, they see how they perform better. Those who do not, they bear the brunt as well. When you are a part of the simulation, yes, there are challenges that they face. There is data to be worked upon. They fail in certain challenges. They do well in certain challenges. And that's where the passion comes in. Are you able to bounce back? Are you able to face challenges, failures, and still not lose your tempo and keep climbing your Everest virtually without losing that? So this lesson on Everest, when you're really climbing, of course, it is experienced, but this is how it can happen in a virtual climb. Power of focus. When you talk about power of focus, are you focusing on what can go right, or are you focusing on what can go wrong? That helps you to climb the real Everest. And even in the simulation, the participants would experience this, that how can your focus determine how high you're going to go up the Everest. Making friends with fear. So this is a simulation wherein you cannot actually make people physically climb one in a virtual simulation. But the exhaustion that you feel in a physical climb is something at times the participants experience with the amount of data that they have to handle with. Some people are able to handle it well. Some people get lost. How do you make friends with this fear of handling data? And that is something which comes across very well. Scale need not scare you. Again, all new information. Nobody is a mountaineer. we have never had anybody who has really climbed Everest. And so everything, all data that comes to them is absolutely new. The scale of information can scare you, but are you able to break it up one step at a time? Expect to deal with the unexpected. Every challenge that comes in the simulation that is unexpected, how do you tackle it in the time frame that is given to you, because they have very limited time to work on it. And that's the last lesson as well, that is time is oxygen. So these 7 lessons get integrated in the simulation. And as somebody talked about, is it immersive? Yes, it is immersive. I'll just show you how it works in this video.
We're having lunch at Camp 1 and one avalanche after the other. This one is almost approaching Camp 1. I can hear it from something from... Huh? Camp 1 में आ गया क्या? Massive.
So as you can see over here, this is live footage from Camp 1 of Everest. And this is a part of one of the challenges in the simulation. So when people are going through challenges, they first actually view what is happening. Then the scenario comes to them. They discuss in their teams. There would be experts pitching in, and they solve the situation. They try to address the situation. They may earn points over there, or they may lose points over there. If you look at this, how do you design the game mechanics of this simulation? First of all, objectives of the simulation. So over here, as I shared with you, the 7 leadership lessons. At the beginning, deciding that yes, these are the 7 lessons that we want to drive through the simulation. So having that clarity, what your simulation is going to convey to the participants of it, what are they going to learn out of it? What do they want? What do you want them to learn out of it? Next is, who is going to be a target audience? So when this simulation was designed, we had a target audience wherein we are looking at young leaders, established leaders, and intact teams. How do they work well together? The third is, how do you design the simulation, the activities, the exercises, the challenges? So this is a combination of tactical and social. It's a hybrid simulation wherein there is a combination of data dependency. So a lot of data points come to the people, come to the participants. They have to work on weather forecast. They have to work on symptoms of certain team members facing challenges, work on the gear that they are carrying. They do resource planning before you start an Everest climb. That's very critical. How much oxygen you carry, how much food you carry, which resources you want to carry. You carry too much weight, you weigh yourself down. You carry too less, you're not going to make it to the summit. So it's a combination of a lot of data to be handled, plus social processes to achieve goals. Now, what do I mean by social processes to achieve goals? It's about how do people interact within teams. There are going to be 6 different experts coming with some expertise into the team. Now, there would be some people who would listen other routes. There would be others who are not ready to listen to others. There would be some leaders who shy away from taking help from their team members because they feel they are responsible for certain things. There would be some leaders who would be very dominating and they would not listen to ideas. So these are certain social processes which come into action when they are put in time constraints, and those reactions are going to result into certain outcomes, certain decisions, which become good reflection points during the debriefing. Now, while designing a simulation like this, yes, events have to be designed, and events can be of 3 types: planned events, chance events, and ad hoc events. So when you talk about planned events, I would say it's a planned event for the simulation designer, but an unexpected event for the participant. So what is a planned event? So when we are designing a simulation, you know when the weather is going to go bad. You know when certain challenge is going to come during the simulation. So it's a planned event for the simulation designer, but for the participant, it's an unplanned event. It's an unexpected event. And yes, in that moment, in that time constraint, they have to take decisions and respond to that. A chance event. Now, this is something, so we have used it in a virtual simulation in the form of a spin wheel as well, where some people had to step into someone else's shoes. And that was a chance event. We would run the spin wheel, and whoever's name came up, that person became the person to step into someone's shoes. So this is a chance event where there is a question mark not only for the participants, but also for the simulation designer or the facilitator, and it happens at the moment. What is an ad hoc event? An ad hoc event can be introduced if the facilitator of the simulation is well versed with how the simulation needs to progress, and if he or she observes that certain learnings need to be driven more strongly, it might need certain spontaneous changes in the simulation. So I'll give you an example. We were doing the simulation for the US Peace Corps Jamaica team, and there were around 30 members participating from Jamaica, from US. The director of US Peace Corps was also there, and there were certain leadership lessons to be driven. And at some point of time during the simulation, we felt that these teams need to be given an experience. They were very comfortable with the leaders in their team, and a leadership shift was going to happen in that particular team. That was something, an information which was shared with us in advance. And so midway through the simulation, as the facilitators, we took the call to swap the leaders and see whether the comfort level still continues. And yes, there was havoc. When the leaders were swapped, suddenly the acceptance of the new leader, even the leader aligning with the thought process of the new team, that went for a toss. And that became a very good source of discussion when we discussed how things change, how we can adapt to leadership change. So these are the kind of events that can be made a part of a simulation like this. Now coming to the next part, which you can see over here, it talks about, so we looked at on the left side, if you see, it talks about objectives of the simulation. On the right, what you see is objectives in the simulation. So objectives in the simulation and of the simulation are never the same. Because when a person, a lot of times participants ask us that what are the objectives of the simulation? How do we have to use it after the simulation? And we tell them, you focus on the objectives in the simulation, get into the role, play the game, enjoy it, be the person in the role. The objectives of the simulation will come after you have catered to the ones in the simulation. So over here, of course, it is climbing Everest. It is reaching the summit with a healthy team. So this is a simulation wherein it's not just about reaching the summit, because when if you want to drive in leadership lessons, it's not just reaching the summit. Are you taking a healthy team to the summit? And when I say a healthy team to the summit, it's not just physical health. It's about how do you function as a team? Is there collaboration? Are people open to communication? Are people ready to give feedback and receive feedback? Are they able to give ideas? So all these things actually make a team healthy. Are people ready to admit mistakes? So these are very important things to make a team work and reach the summit together. So these are the objectives in the simulation. Are you going to the summit, and are you going with a healthy team? And in the simulation, the health of the team is determined by how you handle challenges at each camp. It could be a health challenge, it could be a resource challenge, it could be a weather challenge. So these are the objectives in the simulation. And so whether it is an Everest simulation or it is any simulation that you're designing, this clarity always needs to be there, that there would be objectives of the simulation and there would be objectives in the simulation. If you look at the next thing, just a second, just hold on. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I think so it got stuck. Just a second. Yes. Because I've already paused over here. Are there any questions? so far, or should we address the questions in the end? Rupali, what do you say?
Ma'am, it will be better if we take questions at the end.
Okay, great. So we'll do that. But anybody, while going through this, if you have any top of the mind question, please note it down, or you can put it in the chat box as well. So now, in a simulation, there are elements and there are relations between the elements. So the elements would be the phases of a process. And one of the phases of the process is, for example, a decision-making process. So yes, there would be, as you see the next point, units of knowledge or information shared with the participants. As I said, there is a preparatory meet. People get some information in advance, they get videos in advance, they get certain rules in advance. And that helps them to go through the process of decision-making, because each time there is a challenge coming in, it calls for decisions. Now it calls for who takes the decision. It calls for who gives the ideas. It calls for who is the expert for that role. And that is the next part of the element, the actors, the stakeholders of a simulation. What roles do they play? So there could be an oxygen expert, and that oxygen expert is the key person to decide how much oxygen you want to carry when you climb Everest. You fall short of one oxygen cylinder and your expedition gets called off. If I don't know if anybody is reading the newspapers or watching on the internet right now, there were some climbers who went for the Annapurna Peak expedition recently. One person lost his life, two were stuck, one was stuck at 6,000 meters for 4 days. And so, yes, there are a lot of decisions to be taken at that point of time, what to do, what not to do. So these are real life connections from climbs that we draw. And these actors, these stakeholders take those decisions. Now the responsibilities, if you look at the relations between the elements, the responsibilities are assigned to people who will handle which role. Then there are exchange of resources. In any simulation, there is always exchange of something happening which takes them forward, which makes them earn points, which makes them enhance their score. And in this simulation, there is money, there are means, there are materials. Do you want to buy sunglasses? Do you want to buy an extra crampon or an ice axe? How is it going to help you? What is the contingency planning that you're doing? Because just like for a leader, business can be unpredictable. While climbing Everest, of course, that is highly unpredictable. So are you planning for the unexpected? And then that exchange of knowledge or information happens based on what you are predicting. There are various causes and various consequences, which then get interpreted and discussed when you go to the end of the simulation, because one decision gone wrong at the beginning when you're planning for your resources can impact your final summit push as well. So these are certain things which need to be kept in mind when you are designing a simulation like this. I think my screen is getting stuck again. Just a second. Just hold on. Give me a moment. I just open all of them. Yeah. Now the next part is the roles. And I'll not elaborate much about it because these are a very integral part of the simulation detailing part. But yes, these are the kind of roles that are determined in an Everest simulation. So there's a weather expert, acclimatization, oxygen, cold emergencies, medicine expert. So these are, so when you have a simulation and there are different people as a part of the simulation, then what roles do they play? If this is a business simulation, then there could be a finance manager, a marketing manager. But because this is an Everest climb simulation, you can see that the subject matter experts are very different than a business simulation. But each of them has an impact on the final output. Now, when a simulation is designed, then comes the play testing. So play testing, how does it go through various phases? So the first phase, what we look at is the talk through. So as designers, as a team of designers, sitting together and talking through how the simulation is going to span out over a period of time. When you talk through, inviting questions, inviting doubts, that okay, we are going through this, where does this particular source of information come from? How do we evaluate whether this particular decision has gone right or wrong? So before you actually get into the final design, the first stage is talking through. The next stage is walking through. So when you talk about walkthrough, yes, now the same set of designers, they become a part of one part of the simulation, and they are actually walking through. When I say walking through, they are not playing the simulation, but at each stage, they spell out what do they understand their role as, how have they understood their material, how have they understood the scoring system, how have they understood the challenge. Because when they share the understanding, we know that yes, is everyone understanding it the way we want it to be understood. So that is the next stage, walkthrough. Then comes the round one of play testing. So take a small group of people who are ready to experiment with this and make them go through the game. Now you're not doing the entire simulation, but you're doing just a part of it and seeing whether it's generating the kind of responses, reactions, behaviors, which you expect that particular challenge to generate when they are going through the part of the simulation. Once you do that, at each stage, you're getting some information to modify it. The next stage is a dress rehearsal, where you actually go to a target audience and you run the entire simulation. Now, this dress rehearsal takes you through the entire simulation, and this gives you a lot of work to do, because then you get to see where you need more clarity to be given, which challenge is taking more time than expected, or which one is too easy, too tough, and the difficulty level can be then decided based on that. I'll give you an example. When you look at simulations or game-based learning, the challenges have to be challenging enough that it excites the player, and not too challenging that the player just doesn't want to enter into it. But at the same time, if the challenge is too easy, that is also not going to work. So the optimum level of difficulty of the challenge is something which is very crucial to the design, and that is something which you keep testing at each stage. And then finally, I would say any simulation is a work in progress. So it's been 3 years since we designed this simulation. We have done hundreds of runs, but it is still a work in progress. We keep modifying it. And it gets run, it generates impact in both models, the online as well as the physical model. So I'll show you a quick glimpse now about how the online model works and how the physical model works. So I'll show a quick video over here, first of the online model, and then we will see how the physical model also works, because there's a difference. In the online model, as you can very well understand, it's all about climbing your mental Everest. In the physical model, of course, a major chunk is again climbing the mental Everest, but then there are certain physical challenges, exercises also thrown in, which create that excitement, that adrenaline rush, which comes when you're actually climbing a mountain. So first, let's look at the online version. So we are going to start from the base camp, cross the treacherous Kumbu Ice Fall, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, you enter the dead zone in Camp 4, and finally the summit. But let's start from the base camp first. So we'll fly down to Lukla first. So here we go.
You can see base camp look. That's it. Snowing.
Going as per a sheet of information that you spoke.
Okay.
So we want to quickly calibrate it based on that assumption. If we take a quick minute over, I think we're running out of time, so we'll have to be quick about it. So Kumar, what is the issue with which of these things you want to alter?
No, I just said on the summit day we might need 3 liters per minute is my understanding. Okay, so.
Okay, so then it lasts for how many hours? 6 hours? The bottle lasts?
See over here, avalanche busters, 2 Cool, you have covered up the negative score. Now just 700 more to go. Snow leopards, you have moved to 1210 into positive. And now it's time to move ahead to Cam 3. Sorry guys, you had sunny days till now, but now we have a storm here.
Get it, Lynn.
Lynn, you are
Master
good
of the techno. I think, in terms of different, we were, every one of these conversations where we were under a time constraint. So, just being efficient with our time. I think all the conversations we had were valuable, but just trying to, I guess, be focused in those conversations or understand what this, and also a real life connection, right? I'm in.
Uses of a platform like this, of an experience like this, is actually an alignment of topics. It has huge value in bringing out, fairly deeply ingrained behaviors, which you're seeing, how those, and you're taking people out of the comfort zone. So there are constraints which are there, and that is the time some of these derailing behaviors show up.
Extremely impressed with just the complexity and how many people had put together and how well it was put together.
People are like thinking that online training or online activity is not like as good as we can do physically, but you just prove that thing wrong.
There's all this information to begin with. Kathy and I are not climbers or any of that, and there was so much information that I came into this really worried and overwhelmed, and that I wasn't going to be able to add anything to it. And then you actually got into the game, and it turned out that all it took was good problem solving. And so there was the great fear going into it, and then suddenly, hey, wait, this is really fun. This is great.
It is.
So if you saw, look at the stages of it. So the immersiveness is the use of the videos, going to Lukla, then reaching the Everest base camp. So using the right amount of videos, giving them mental challenges. So you saw teams discussing the resource planning, that how much oxygen we need to carry. Then having the scoreboards running, they have their live scoreboards running. That keeps them excited where they stand against the competition. You also saw how people reflect on their learning, that what they did right during the simulation, how they can do differently. And then in the end, what you heard was what the climbers have to say. So what they felt when they got into the simulation. There was a lot of fear. And then as they got into it, how they realized that, yes, it's exciting. So yes, the scale need not scare you. That is something which when the last person was talking about it, you could make it out. So this is how an online simulation can work. But yes, you can do a simulation in a physical format as well. When you have a physical format simulation, you need more props because you need to give them a feel. So we use maps, we use resource cards, we use 3D printed resources. So there would be a 3D printed ice axe, a crampon. We have actually rented out mountaineering gear so that people get a feel of it. But how does it look like? So I'll just take you through a quick glimpse of that as well.
Mission Everest. It was totally new concept, and there was a lot of curiosity on what's going to be there. So of course we knew we'll not be actually climbing Everest, but then what is it? And you mentioned it would be experiential learning. So all the more curiosity of what can be there, how are we going to do it? So a lot of questions.
The best part is the actual simulation of the Everest and its correlation in the actual world with different activities that we had. There is always some learning in every activity, and when we look back in every activity, there is something to get. So I think that is very, very good thing.
This is something interesting. We need to look forward for it, so that वो ट्रैक से पहले जो anxiety रहता है ना, तो it was there. The activities they were games, but then after that activity, how do you connect it to your real life situation? That is something which I mean, it's my takeaway.
One thing we knew, it brings learning, but now the next step for us is to convert that learning into our daily work, to continue on that momentum. That's what I would say.
There's a difference between a physical simulation and a virtual simulation. And let me just open my presentation over here again. Just hold on. So when you compare an online versus a physical simulation, that is a difference that you see, that in a simulation, you need to add. Are you able to hear me clearly? Yeah, yes. Because I just saw my internet connection is unstable, so I just thought I'll check with you. Yes. So in a physical simulation, you need to infuse energy as well. And that energy comes with certain activities where there are props which make it exciting. There is movement involved. And that's how the same simulation can be transformed from a virtual to a physical format simulation as well. So these are just, apart from the lessons that I talked about, I started off with a question on what can be addressed to an Everest simulation. These are the variety of things. So it can be customized. The 7 lessons are of course integrated. But if you want to have a virtual Everest simulation, these are the various competencies which can be addressed. Of course, you have to pick and choose which are the key ones you want to focus on, and then the debriefing focuses on that. But these are all that can be covered even when you're doing a virtual climb through the process that I talked to you about, the design of the simulation, the challenges, the events, the roles that you have, the discussion points that you have, the resources that you give. All these are going to impact and get people to learn lessons about all of these. And how such simulations can be used? It can be applied in various situations. We have worked with students as well. In fact, college students also who are aspiring for career goals to move forward. We have used with students as well. But when you move into the corporate world, yes, it works very well when you are working on a collaboration and leadership outbound. We are looking at a pre-organizational development intervention to bring focus on key developmental areas. So when you are starting a leadership program, before starting, when you start with a simulation, the readiness or the openness to learning increases, because as a participant, I know what went well for me as a leader, what did not go well for me. I have had leaders talking to me after the simulation telling me that I felt I'm a good influencer, but I could not influence my team in the simulation, and I want to know how I can do that. And after this, when a person comes into a training session on influencing skills, half the battle is won, because the person is ready to change. So that is how a simulation can have an impact. A simulation does not teach you how to do things, but a simulation makes you understand what are you doing right and what can you do better. So that is a pre-OD intervention. It can be prior or post an annual team offsite. Like there are organizations who do goal setting offsites. You may set a lot of goals, but if you don't have the attitude to pursue those goals, then setting those numbers is of no use. So yes, this is again how you can connect it. And a capstone activity post an intervention, a learning intervention. So that is after you have learned certain things, are you actually practicing those things? So this is if you use it at the end of an intervention, then it is used as a testing tool. Are you really practicing what you have learned? So these are the different ways in which you can actually apply the simulation. So yes, with this, I think so I have come to the end time of today's session also. I can see it is 3:56. So in brief, I could convey to you how this simulation works, what goes into the design of it, how can it be conducted in a physical as well as an online format, how can it be used for different purposes. And before we close and I open up to questions, because I've talked so much about immersiveness, these are all real video clips. So I'm going to take you from the base camp to the top of the summit in the next 2 minutes. So we'll watch this video and there we will close my part of talking. Then 5 minutes we can have the questions from you. So here we go.
Lunch at camp 1. One avalanche after the other. This one is almost approaching camp
1. As you have reached the top of Everest. And with this, I think so now I'm open to questions. So over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful session and very interesting session. I now invite questions from the panel members as well as from the participants. Please ask the questions, or if you have any query, then you can write in question and answer them. Yes.
I can see one question from...
One question is from Miss Elizabeth Lee.
Yes.
She said, I am interested to know how many staff are needed for an in-person event and for an online program, and what knowledge and skills are they expected to have?
Yes. So when it comes to, I'll talk about the online program first. So when you talk about an online program, we need one there would be one lead facilitator and one co-facilitator per team. Because in an online program, there are breakout rooms and we have one co-facilitator attached with each. So in an online program, what are the requirements? What is expected as skill set from these members? It depends on what is the depth of observation that is required. If it is like an assessment development center, then we might require trainers who can jot down very specific points about the leadership behaviors. Otherwise, yes, even if we have junior facilitators, we have done it with interns, we have done it with interns from psychology background, from management background. The benefit that you have in an online Zoom session is you can record the breakout rooms. So there are co-facilitators in the breakout rooms to support the teams. But then if you want to give inputs to each person post session, you have the recording of the breakout room. So in an online session, you need one co-facilitator. It could be a junior one also per team. That works. When you do an in-person event, in an in-person event we have done it for a group size as small as 25. We have done it for a group size as large as 200. And for a group size as large as 200, then there are no deep observations. It's for building up the spirit. So for a large group, it was 8 facilitators. Again, out of that, 2 senior and 6 junior. But if you want deep learnings over there as well, then yes, 1 facilitator per team. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question, please. I request panel members, any of them, to please ask the question.
Yeah, I had one question. It was interesting. The videos were interesting. So I was just wondering, how do you relate it to the real life situations in the virtual this thing? Because mountaineering itself is a very challenging game.
Right.
Not many can take to that.
Right.
But do you think it is applicable to many situations, or mostly in the management you are applying it, or?
So we have used it more in management scenarios, but it can work even. So as I said, we have even worked with students on this, because when it comes to Everest, and when you look at those 7 lessons, they're applicable to everyone. Preparation plus passion is performance. As a student, you don't come in prepared, you are not going to do well. You're not passionate about what you are working on, you're not going to do well. And when you connect it with the simulation, as I said, so how do you connect the dots? They come in, that's why we have a preparatory meet before the simulation. Those who come in prepared, they have a lot of clarity when they move up the Everest. Those who don't come in prepared, there is a havoc in their team, because they have very little time to discuss. They take decisions which are not well thought of, and one wrong decision costs them heavily. And that's the impact that they experience. On the other hand, even passion. We have had teams who are having a very low score in the beginning, but they don't lose tempo. They don't get into a blame game. They don't blame others for making things wrong. They don't lose their focus. And they keep focusing on the next challenge. And people who have been at the bottom have risen to the top. So this is how we try to connect the dots between what happens, so the mountain lessons and how they apply to your real life. So at work also, yes, you might be taking up projects where when you're 40% through your climb, so I would just connect it that you start a project with a lot of energy. You start climbing a mountain with a lot of energy. When you're 40% through the climb, you suddenly realize you have lost all energy. And that is the time you start having thoughts of giving up. It could be a student also preparing for an exam, and he feels that, no, perhaps I'm not good enough for it. Now the test is going from 40 to 80%. Are you able to maintain that tempo? Are you able to move one step at a time, focusing on the next step? Once you are at 80%, you again have energy. And now the last 20% are easier to accomplish. So these are elements which happen in our real life, which happen in the simulation, and which happen in the real mountain climbs. That's how we connect the dots.
Yeah, I appreciate, because these are some universal things which you can take out from the mountaineering lessons.
Yes.
And apply it at many places. Apart from management, I was thinking that whether it can be applied to even other subjects in the university.
Like which subject would you say? Which subject would you like to?
Like science.
Like science. I've not given it a thought, but I think so. I'm always open to giving it a thought and seeing how we can connect it. So yes,
Yeah, that's the question I was about to ask you, whether you have developed anything other than management training program like that.
We are majorly into management training programs. We have, of course, an entire student training division where we train engineering students as well. Over there, of course, all the training that happens, it's on technical subjects. But we are yet to design technical subject simulation. That is what I would say.
Okay, let's know when you design the technical.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? I hope there is no question right now. Next, I would like to invite Coordinator of Center of Excellence of Simulation and Gaming, Dr. Digyasu Dubey sir, for the words of thanks.
Thank you, Rupali ma'am. At the outset, our most sincere thanks to Himani Chandorkar ji for accepting our invitation and sparing precious time out of her busy schedule. And thanks for such a interactive and knowledge enriching session. Thank you, Himani ji. We are also thankful to the COESAG for the collaboration and support in the organization of Pratiti-2023 Becoming Aware webinar series. We express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Upinder Dhar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, and Dr. Santosh Dhar, Rector and Dean of Sri Vaishnav Vidyapit Vishwavidyalaya Indore, for their guidance and motivation. Thanks to Dr. Ken Guruprasad sir for being with us today. Our sincere thanks to our panelists, Dr. Elizabeth Lake, Dr. Ramesh Sharma ji, Dr. Saurabh Jain, Dr. T.K. Mandal, and other panelists present, and all the participants who make this webinar successful. I am also thankful to Dr. Rupali Bhartiya, all the members of the COESG and IT team of the university for their kind support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dubey, and thank you, Guru Prasad sir and Rupali also. And I would really like to know more about you, because you have a complete cell focusing on simulations and gaming. I was not aware of that till the time you connected with me. So I would be really glad to know more about it, and glad to learn from you as well, because I think so you guys are doing a lot of research in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Himani ma'am. Thank you, Guru Prasad sir. Thank you, Digyasu. I want to thank all the participants for being with us today, and I request all the participants to please fill the feedback form as mentioned in the chat box for getting e-certificate. Thank you, and we will come back with another interesting webinar in this series. Till then, have a nice time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.